But then we were invited to update it and make it more extensive, more rigorous, with more countries. And while we were involved in that, my colleague at the time, John Irvine, went off to meet the minister, who was Robert Jackson. Some of you may remember him, with a slightly checkered history. And he told us a story that a few months earlier, he'd been called into the cabinet meeting to decide the science vote. He'd gone armed with a single sheet of paper, which was the last table in our first report. Mrs. Thatcher had given him 2 or 3 minutes to present the case, which he had done on the basis of the gap we had pointed to between British spending and other countries, at the end of which, in Robert Jackson's words, she wrinkled her nose, said, "That's not very good, is it? We better give them an extra £100 million. We were delighted to hear that. That was a direct hit, and you don't get many direct hits in science policy. But then there was a twist in the tale. Robert Jackson said to John Irvine, "What's going to be the gap you find in this new study?" And John Irvine was sometimes a bit prone to exaggerate, and he said, "Well, it could be 400 or 500 million. Jackson turned to his civil servants and said, "What's the most we could expect to get next time round?" And the civil servant said, "Well, we might get another 100 or 200 million. Jackson turned back to Irvine and said, "If you come in showing that the gap is 500 million, I will put my statisticians to work showing that's wrong. If you come in with a gap of 100 to 200 million, I will use it to get more money for the research vote." Which left us with a slight moral dilemma, one which I often put to my students. And again, I'll leave it to you to think how we responded to that. But it does point to a problem here in science policy research. You have this sort of moral dilemma in the background going on all the time, which I'll come back to in a minute.